Welcome to Real Rockford Files, for tales of the paranormal, supernatural, and the flat-out unbelievable. Today I'm going to be sharing ghost stories from New Hampshire. Let's get into it. Story 1. In the early 1950s in the city of Nashua, New Hampshire, there was an incident at the Black Bridge, which was located on a stretch of railroad tracks not far from the Hudson Bridge, which is next town over. My great-grandmother, who lived directly across from the tracks, was present when a train derailed and crashed into a nearby building. The bridge was partially torn to pieces and many people died, and almost all who lived were scarred for life. My great-grandmother told me and my father, when he was very young, that some of the passengers crossed the field to her house. Being a kindly woman, she did not turn them away and help them. One man, according to great-granny, had the skin of his back missing, but she said that he was in such tremendous shock that he did not even seem to be aware of it. Sadly, many children perished in the wreck. Many years later, me and my family lived on the street that runs down along the hill and comes to a stop at Black Bridge. Me and my friends named it that because it was as black as pitch. To this day, the laughter of young children can be heard as though they were playing under the bridge, but nobody is ever seen. Apparitions and ghosts of people who have killed themselves haunt the area as well. If you go to the bottom of Lock Street, you'll find out for yourself. Before I move on to the next story, I would like to point out that a majority of my viewers aren't subscribed. If you can just take a moment and hit that subscribe button, maybe click like or leave a comment, it'll go a long way in helping me fight the algorithm. You can always take it back later, and it's totally free. Now, back to the stories. Story 2. My husband works as a maintenance manager in an old mill building. The building was constructed in 1890. It has had many uses over the years, from the textile industry to the production of fire engines and rifles. It is currently an educational facility. Just the age of the building makes it interesting, but if you add the history, it is even more so. My husband has told me from the beginning that the building was haunted. Stories abound from the other workers that work in the building. The first experience my husband had was hearing the laughter of small girls. This was according to him at about 3 a.m. on a Monday morning. The building was empty except for my husband. He was covering for a janitor that was on vacation. He was on the 3rd floor of the building and was feeling uncomfortable for some reason. He had cleaned a set of bathrooms and was making his way to the nearby offices when he heard a giggle. He said his blood ran cold and he just stopped where he was. He paused and listened but heard nothing. He started to move again, and once again he heard laughter. This time there were 2 distinct voices laughing, both sounding like small children. At this point he decided to go to another part of the building until the sun came up. Later that morning he returned to the area that seemed so frightening a short time earlier. Now in the warm early morning light wasn't scary at all. He did notice that there were pictures along the wall near where he had heard the laughter. 2 of these pictures caught his eye. The pictures, each 8 by 10, showed sisters in Victorian dress, while they were adults. The coincidence sent a shiver down his spine. The next week, when the janitor he was covering for returned to work, my husband asked if he had ever heard anything while working up there. "You mean my girls?" was the reply. The janitor said the building was really creepy at night, but that nothing had ever happened, so he didn't worry about it. He said that along with the laughter of the little girls, there were certain doors that would slam even though they were already closed. Also, there were seats in the auditorium which he would always find down, even though they would spring back like theater seats. It was always the same seats, and it didn't matter if the room was used at all during the previous day or not. He showed me the seats, and to this day I'll find them down in the morning. On and off over the years, he has had to work 3rd shift for different reasons. Each time he does, there's an experience. He has himself heard doors he recently closed slam shut. He has heard muffled conversations only to find the area empty when he investigates. He has also discussed this with other employees, and anyone who has spent time in the building alone, off hours, has something to share. The first time I was with him at night when the building was empty, we experienced something together. He had stopped because I needed to go to the bathroom, and we were nearby, so it was ideal. He also wanted to check an office for a leak as it was raining that evening. He had had problems earlier with the space. We were inside this particular lab, and while it was dry, there was something more upsetting going on. We stood in the space, and he checked for a leak. We turned to leave, and he paused. I followed his gaze to the bottom of the door. We could plainly see shadows moving outside the door by looking at the gap between the door and the floor. It wasn't just one or two, it was nearly constant, as if a large group of people were walking by. It subsided in just a few moments. We walked outside the lab and checked the entire floor. We were alone. We checked each floor and found no one else in the building. The parking lot was empty too. Since then, nearly each time we were alone in the building, we've had strange encounters. I'll share more as time allows. Story 3. This story was posted by someone who works at the same mill as the previous story. I was working an overnight shift in an old textile mill. The mill was 117 years old. I had to stay overnight to keep an eye on a leaky water main where it entered the building. By 11 p.m. the building was empty. I made a quick tour of the building just to satisfy myself that I was alone. Security had gone through before me, and when they left they told me I was alone in the building as well. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I returned to my post to watch the pipe leak slowly. There wasn't much to do in the small space, so I started to read a book. It was about 12:30 a.m. when I heard a muffled conversation outside the space I was in. I got up and stuck my head out of the room and looked down the hallway, but there was no one there. I sat back down and picked up my book and heard it again. This time I walked out of the office and up and down the hall. I checked each room and found no one else there. Now this is a 3-story building, and I only checked the first floor, the floor I was on. I sat back down and read for a little while longer. I needed to stretch, so I took a long walk. I went to the 3rd floor and walked the main corridor. Everything was quiet. Same thing on the 2nd floor. I looked out the windows and saw my vehicle was the only one in the lot. It was about an hour later, and I had made my tour of the building and heated up a dinner. I was sitting in the space with the leaky pipe, eating dinner, when I heard the muffled voices again. I ignored it this time, and eventually they either faded away or I tuned them out. I sat there and read for about an hour after I ate, with no other noises. At 3 a.m. I got up to go to the bathroom. I walked down the corridor, passing 4 offices before getting to the bathroom. All was quiet and dark inside the offices. I did my business and washed my hands and walked out of the bathroom. I noticed the office nearest me now had a small desk lamp on. I didn't see anyone in the office, so I stuck my head outside to see if a car was here. There was none. I went back inside and looked around. I called out a couple of times but got no answer. I mustered up some courage and entered the locked office where the desk lamp was shining. I looked around and there didn't seem to be anything out of place. I shut off the light and backed out of the room. I pulled the door tight and backed away. Just as I left the corridor and entered the space with the leaky pipe, I heard a door slam. I may have made a noise myself, like a startled scream, but I'm not sure. I looked back out, down the corridor, and saw nothing. I was pretty well freaked out, but I managed to walk down the hallway. When I got to the last office near the bathrooms, I noticed that the desk lamp was back on. I didn't bother turning it off again. I went back to my space and sat listening. I couldn't even concentrate enough to read. I just sat and listened. The voices would come and go, sometimes nearly loud enough to make out the conversation, but never quite. As the sun rose and the light made its way inside the building, the voices ended. The first shift worker arrived just before 6 a.m., and I couldn't wait to get out of there. It was just too creepy for me. Story 4. It was a beautiful summer day until this happened. Sitting at home playing video games and watching TV. Nobody was home but me. What I experienced was very real. It was about 4 o'clock. Nobody had come home yet. I was expecting my sister to be home any minute. That's when it happened. Footsteps in my parents' room. My parents' room is above the living room where I was playing games and watching TV. I didn't notice the footsteps until I had turned the TV down. They were scary. First they walked towards the door, then back towards the window, so I went up to see if my parents were home. Impossible, I thought, because no cars were home. When I got to the top of the stairs and checked the door, it was locked. I knocked on the door and there was no answer. I kept hearing those footsteps downstairs, but at night they were up in the attic. There was actually one time I went up there and the footsteps were gone, but all the nails that were hanging out of the ceiling were now bent. Another true story is when we were living in my uncle's house. My parents were gone and it was me, my sister, and my friend. We were sitting down watching a movie and my sister's friend gotten up to get something to drink. We paused the movie and that's when we heard them. People downstairs in the basement shooting around on the pool table. When me and my sister got up to check, nobody was down there. We never heard those sounds again, but we were always wary of them. Story 5. It's still unexplained and I'm still unsure of what I've seen, but I'm here today to share this story with you and anyone else who has possibly had this encounter. I was around 9, maybe 10 when this happened. Ever since I can remember, I've always grown up with supernatural things happening to me or my family. My parents were in their bedroom. I say it was around 10 p.m., possibly 11. I had woken up out of a dead sleep. I just felt so threatened. It was odd and bothers me to this day. I looked over to my doorway and I could clearly see 3 black figures with red eyes. One tall, one medium, and one small. I started panicking and the tallest figure spoke. However, it sounded exactly like my mother, clearly saying, "It's all right, don't be afraid, come to mommy." The other 2 figures would try to coax me to come to them as they held their arms out. My mother never believed me until I told her again when I was 12. We had moved into a different apartment, and they seemed to follow me wherever I moved to, still trying to coax me to come into their arms. They really are the only things that worry me, and typically I am not as bothered by spirits as I am by these beings. However, now that I am 15, they have stopped. Instead of seeing them, I will feel like someone is on top of me, holding me down, as someone else makes it so I can't talk. It's almost as if I was born mute. I literally am unable to utter a noise. I'd really love it if someone could explain these things to me. Story 6. This all started a few years ago. My sister and I started to feel that there was something in our house. Our parents didn't believe us at all. My sister has never told me exactly what has happened to her, but I do know that our bed would shake at night. About 2 years ago is when the most activity was happening. Things would sound like they would fall, and when we went to look, nothing would be out of place. One night my sister had a few friends over because they had a field trip for school early the next morning. That night I had a very bizarre and scary dream. I suddenly woke up to find I couldn't move, and I had a very heavy feeling on my chest. I tried to yell for my sister, but I couldn't talk. After about 15 to 20 seconds, it went away, and I tried not to think about it, and I went back to sleep. About an hour later, the same thing happened. After this incident, there wasn't much that went on. Recently, things have started back up again. Last night at about 12 a.m., I again had a bizarre and scary dream and woke up to an extremely heavy feeling on my chest. My arms were pinned to my chest and I couldn't move. I tried to yell for my mother, but again I couldn't talk. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, and I attempted to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. It felt like someone was intensely watching me. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went down into the living room and asked my sister if she had anything happen to her recently. She said that she woke up one night and it felt like someone was pressing down on her chest. Every night she felt like someone would touch her and that someone was always watching. That's why she started to sleep in the living room. When I told her what happened to me, she wouldn't even let me go back up to my room. When I woke up this morning, I went up to my room to get ready for school and had a strong feeling that someone was watching me. I don't know if I should be scared or just accept whatever this is, but I am definitely scared. The only places that things ever happen are on the second floor of our house. If anyone has any advice, what can I do about this? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Hope you enjoyed.